All right, it is Thursday, November 21st, and this is a meeting to talk about active design and user experience tasks for Backdrop. That includes the product, but also all of our websites. And this week, we have started a massive sprint improving issues primarily with the forum, but also with the main website and with the API site. Any of our web properties that need attention are going to finally get it, which is great. Thanks, Tim, for organizing the sprint. I think we had a pretty good kickoff this weekend, and I've already seen the work we were doing this weekend trickle into this week as well. So I'm hoping that momentum will continue. And then we're going to have another big sprint this coming weekend and hopefully be able to close as many of these issues as possible. Been lingering for a while, so it's good to see some progress. On the API site, the primary issue we wanted to fix is the menus. This is the sidebar menu. When you're on a mobile device, it tends to overlap everything on the page. I think there might be some CSS left over in there from the old theme where we had the drawer menu. So it would be good to just check there, make sure that that's working as it's supposed to. Backdropcms.org. And this actually is a note that goes for all of our properties. We've been making some minor improvements to the Borg theme. In particular, we have better styling for code tags, and that would work not only on backdropcms.org, but on the forum site and the API site, anywhere that anyone wants to write code. We've copied a little bit more of the style from GitHub, or I should say Peter has, and it looks really nice now that it's cleaned up. Then we also have, we want to be able to take that theme and deploy it across all sites. That theme has a couple of accessibility issues fixed as well. The base font size was previously 16, it's now 18, which is Google's minimum requirement for getting a good page rank score. And the blue color for our links was too light to show up on the gray background that we use all over the theme. And so I've darkened it a smidge just to make it match, line up with accessibility requirements. So I think it's now 2A instead of, it's not 3A still, but it's 2A. And we might want to consider going darker only where we have dark backgrounds, but that seemed like it was going to be complicated. So for now, I was just let's make it one color that we know is going to be accessible everywhere in the theme. And then there's a bunch of other tiny little improvements that have been happening to Borg that haven't been deployed to the API or the forum site recently. So it'd be good to get those in there too. On the forum, there has been so much work going on. It's been really great. We've gotten a couple of the changes we did last week deployed. I think Peter did the deployment on that, so thank you again. And then we have a whole bunch more stuff coming down the pipe. It looks like there's some big functionality changes we're hoping to get implemented that will make life easier on moderators and anyone who gets any of their content moderated, whether accidentally or flagged otherwise. I'd love to see those getting done. And then anything else, as you guys are noticing issues with the forum, Tim's been doing a really good job of taking feedback from the forum and turning into issues. But if anyone notices anything that you want to have done that isn't getting attention, creating an issue in the queue this week in particular is a good way to get it noticed. In the future, anywhere you can voice that request is good, but in the queue is definitely going to get it looked at eventually. All right, so for Backdrop the product, we have a handful of user experience issues that we talk about every time we go through this meeting. There are a couple of updates since the last time we've talked about user experience. Flexi templates or flexible templates or whatever we're calling them have some confusing user interfaces just because the problem space is confusing. One of them in particular that we've been going back and forth on about what language to use is how to tell people how their row widths will behave. And so it sounds like we have a rough consensus that the current proposed language is slightly better than the previous proposed language. And so I would like to move forward with that. I'm not sure it's perfect. I think there's definitely still room for improvement, but I think even if we can say, this is better, go, keep working, find something else that's better, go, keep working. That's going to be a good way to get our interfaces improved rather than trying to get it exactly right the first time. It also looks like we have a consensus on creating a theme function for human versus machine names of things in core. It looks like everybody there wanted the same behavior, but it was just a matter of whether in some places it's on one line, in some places it's on 2 lines. And I think that's going to be pretty easy to solve with adding a class that would either make the items stack vertically or not. But we can use exactly the same markup. We can use the same theme function to generate that. So I think that is ready for a pull request also. So yay for consensus. It doesn't look like we have a generic issue for the next one, which is for indenting any field that is dependent on any other. It does look like we have a views issue for that, which is number 1968.
Yeah.
I don't know if we should repurpose that issue.
Yes, I think
Okay.
yes. So I originally seemed to file that back in 2016, and I noticed it on in the views UI. There's some pretty good screenshots there that describe the issue in very much detail. And the last screenshot is how it looks versus how it should look. So yeah, I'll see if we can repurpose it, and I'll spot other issues.
Okay.
Sorry, other places in the UI where this is like very prominent.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's great.
It explains why I couldn't find the issue before, because it was view specific. So
okay.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for finding it now and putting it in the agenda.
Yeah, no worries.
We also have a request to change the way drop-down menus work. But that issue is labeled with needs more feedback, because if we do change something like the way drop-down menus work out of the box, that's probably good, but it will also affect all existing sites. We want to make sure all existing sites feel that the change was an improvement. And if they had added any of their own workarounds, we're going to need to properly notify them that changes have happened. So I don't know whether that needs to be like a setting you can opt into or out of, or how else we're going to handle that. But we definitely should continue talking about that issue. Drop-down menu behavior is number 2370. In particular, that's the issue with top-level links not getting visited, even though those are usually the most important pages. So trying to either duplicate the link or making it easier for people to know what action expands a submenu versus what action will navigate you to a page through the menu. This is not unique to us. This is a problem with all drop-down menus on the internet, but finding some way to solve that for our purposes will be good. We also have a request to change the way select lists work, so that if you ever have a select list that has only one item in it, it will not offer you the choice to choose that. It will set that item as the default, unless there is if it's not a required field, like if you don't need a value, you could leave it out. But if there's only one option and it is an option and it is required, there's no reason that we should make people click in the button and select the only option. We can do that for them. And there's a couple of approaches in that issue about how to do that. I think Nate added a comment there which had a suggestion for how to fix the field UI. But I would love to see a solution that fixes it everywhere on every interface, which is probably going to be a little trickier, but I think it will be a good improvement.
Yeah, I think that we were contemplating between either making those fields render as plain text instead of, widgets, instead of being select dropdowns, or having them be disabled. And I'm not sure if the sort of like the concern there is accessibility, as in if it's plain text, then people cannot tab through it, so they might not know.
Yeah, interesting. I don't think there's a comment there about accessibility yet. I'm not sure if you had that conversation on Gitter, but it might be good to get that into the issue queue. Maybe it was earlier. I didn't read all the comments.
No, it's not being mentioned. The comments is just a huge screenshot, another screenshot, and just some small comments.
Okay.
I love that.
And then we have our longstanding issue to get promoted modules to appear as promoted in the installer. That's issue 3193, which I don't think has made any progress since the last time we talked about it. I think we had talked about updating the parent issue for a list of things we need to do in order to get that done, just so that we have some idea of what comes next, because every time we don't look at it for a while, we forget all of the moving pieces that are involved in that.
So I roughly remember that we need the feed that is being consumed by each side to also include the, so on b.org, we already created a checkbox that says this is promoted. So we have that in place. Now we need to get that piece of information into whatever is consumed by the product when it pulls information. So that's a JSON feed, is it?
Feed. I'm just adding these boxes right now.
Yeah, I think that the feed already includes information like which version is the recommended one when it comes to minor branches of like the same module, but it doesn't include that information, the promoted bit.
Okay, maybe now we can move forward on that one. Maybe not. We'll see. All right, we have a handful of design-focused issues also. One of them is, we talked about the last time this meeting, was to remove the color change behind the site name in the basis theme, and that was done and merged issue 4093. So thanks everybody who helped with that. We have another issue, number 4095, about how to fix the gap that shows below the hero block in basis. And this was sort of raised a bigger question about how do we handle ongoing CSS changes in core? Like, we want to be able to implement these, but we don't want to break everybody's sites when we do it. We had an example of this earlier when we tried to change the way floated fields worked. We changed the way floated fields works in something that looks like it worked in core, but when it got distributed into the wild, it ended up breaking a bunch of Kinship themes, so we had to revert it. And so I think Tim and I were talking about this earlier. How do we deliver CSS in a way that is backwards compatible, CSS changes? And the only thing that I thought of that would be truly backwards compatible is a little bit terrifying, where we would record like the version of Backdrop that you installed when you installed it. And if any later versions of core include CSS changes, we would not include those CSS changes on your site. So in order to do that, every version that includes CSS changes would need to include a separate CSS file that can be excluded, so that we only add the CSS files that you need. This is less terrifying now that we have CSS aggregation enabled by default, so we're not going to be creating like a bunch of extra files added in the header, but it is going to be a little bit messy in terms of us continuing to maintain the basis theme with a bunch of additional CSS files. One thing to keep in mind, though, is that we could come up with a some kind of a policy about at what point those CSS files get merged into the core base theme. So we could have something that's like, obviously when we get to 2.x, we'll like squish all of those into the main file. But what if we had something that happened more recently? So like we can give people some kind of a warning on their status report that's like, hey, You're only including style sheets from whatever. You should test this on your site and see if it works, yes or no. And when they click that button, like I've tested it all or whatever, we could update the version in their database and then include those files. And so then we could have something that will be like, after a year, we squash those files into the main one. I don't know. It would be some kind of internal policy thing that we could build into core that might make it a little easier on people to give them more time to like test the changes that are applied, see if they break or not, fix them or not. And then they could have that warning go away on their status report if they got updated. And then if they didn't, it would continue to be there. Like at some point, your site's going to break when we merge these changes. So yeah, I don't know.
So was the idea to have additional CSS files that override the existing ones?
Yeah.
And what would they call them? Would we call them? As in,
we need to come up with some kind of naming convention. I was thinking about even including like the version number in the file name, and then we could just have a tool that like looped over all the file names and included anything that's like less than your install number or something like that. Or we could just, include them all one at a time, depending. I don't know how many versions are how many core minor versions are going to include CSS changes to the theme. It probably won't be all of them.
Can I?
Yeah, sorry, Kotin. Go.
I was going to ask about sort of an alternative approach that's similar, which is just to have a single option in the theme which says, I'd either like to freeze my CSS or feel free to push changes my way. And then it's just a single, then all new changes could go into one file. And the user would be giving us a blanket like, no, don't touch my CSS, or sure, I can handle it. And then we wouldn't have all the different iterations. It would just be a one-time choice.
Yeah, that would be cleaner in terms of managing the CSS files.
I thought of sub-theming at basis and keeping the base theme for everyone and make an additional step for people that want to actually. But I'm not sure how versioning, because everything that is included in core inherits the version from core with its release. And I'm not sure if we could sort of like have semantic versioning has 3 digits. So if we had a 4th for just basis or something like that for the sub-themes of basis. So the idea was that everyone keeps the basis version like the main theme, but with its update, we have some sort of notice that say, for your information.
We'd still have this exact same problem though if we had changes in the sub-theme that need to be made. So we're not avoiding the problem by not solving it. We're just creating another place for it to appear. And there's also, like, I'm personally against adding more themes to core because that ends up getting really confusing, especially if they're base themes for people who like don't know, or they like install the main one and then install the sub one and they're like, why is it not different? It's just not like, you want that to be something that people like understand before they turn it on. They don't need to turn it on and be like, oh, this theme is broken. It's not doing anything. It's the same as the other one.
Yeah, my thought was that if we do not update the existing sites to include whatever changes are included on the sub-themes, which is where we'd be making the changes, then existing sites would not change. We wouldn't touch them.
We could do it in Drib.
Oh, yeah.
We could have like a basis fixed or something.
Oh, yeah, that sounds a bit more. Yeah, but then we need to come up with a policy that says that if the CSS changes are actually bug fixes, we are allowed to do it. But for example, things that are opinionated, as in removing the background color from the logo or something like that, they should go in a sub-theme, which at some point we merge into core or something.
Anything in the theme is sort of subjective as to whether it's a bug fix or whether it's opinionated. Like the image float thing, right? We thought it was a bug fix, but then it broke everything. And so that's something that's like, it's not safe, even though it's a bug fix. It's not safe to put it in the base theme. So I think that the kind of issue we're dealing with now is like, well, is it I don't know. That like in the white space, it's also kind of a bug fix.
The thing that you mentioned was an exception. It was actually, we thought that it was a fix and we didn't we didn't know that it was changing things, like breaking things on sites. Whereas the change with the background of the logo, like the name, the site name, we knew the side effects. Like we knew what we were changing and we knew what it would affect. Whereas the other thing, we just reverted it because it was unintentional. We didn't mean to break the
Yeah.
existing sites. So I think if we clarify sort of that and establish a policy, yeah. Oh, and
I
BW
still
Panda.
think though that like the reason we decided to put that name change in is because it's better now than it was before. And I wouldn't
Yes.
want to say we're not allowed to make the site better because these are opinionated changes either.
Yeah.
So I think we need to be able to like have a policy, but every issue still needs to kind of stand on its own merit and be like, this is going to make it easier for new people to place hero blocks on their page. Like that's an important thing, I think, and that might outweigh the like opinion of the person who wrote the original theme that intended there only be one.
Yeah. I
But
think
yeah.
that is a clearly sort of like legitimate breakage. Like when we've never explored the option of putting 2 hero blocks in a row, and then now that we did, we saw that it was a breakage. So that qualifies as a bug fix, it's not opinionated.
But where you put the fix might be.
Yes, okay, I agree. But then Peter just pointed out that we have a basis contrib thing existing already, so maybe that's a good. Yeah,
We could also check the way that Drupal worked is that if you had a core project name basis and a contrib project name basis, the contrib project would win.
Yeah.
We could do the same thing in Backdrop if we did have anything super opinionated. But that means that every time we had a core release, we'd have to have like a release of the basis theme at the same time that includes all of the same changes that we wanted it to include.
Well, that's only if we override the same CSS files. We need to update the files. If we have a separate on top of that, which overrides the rules instead of the files, that targeted to just specific CSS fixes instead of the entire file, then we wouldn't have to keep updating it.
Right, that would need a different name. The theme would need a different name. So we could have like a basis updated or a.
Yeah, there is a basis contrib.
Yeah, well, I think in contrib, is it called basis or is it called?
It's called basis contrib underscore contrib.
Interesting. Yeah, I was thinking if we just had a copy of basis in contrib, then we wouldn't like it would win that war. So you'd be like, oh, I could use the core one that has all this weird stuff, or I could use the like fixed one in contrib, and then you wouldn't have that issue of like it's 2 themes. So you still just have one theme. You're just overriding the whole thing. I don't know how I feel about that, but it's an option.
Does anyone know what
hack than a fix? But yeah, I don't know. I personally would like to be able to include CSS changes in core so that new installs are better. Yeah. But as somebody who's running a lot of older Backdrop sites, I also feel the pain of like not wanting to break things you weren't expecting to break when you do a core update. You're like, hey, it'll be fine. And you're like, why is my theme not working? I don't understand. So having some way to be able to ensure that you get those changes or not, I think is important. I do like the idea of having only one thing to include, Tim, like either include the CSS or don't. And that also could be something that would be pretty easy to document. It would be like, if you updated core and your theme is broken, go and check this box and it'll put it back the way it was before. I think that's going to be easy for people to understand. Yeah, I don't know. I think that sounds more exciting than having 100 CSS files to maintain.
Yeah. Peter,
do we know what WordPress does or other places?
I don't know what WordPress does. We should check.
Maybe that's why they release a new theme every year or something. Whatever it is, like they just call it 20 years.
Yeah. So I was thinking that, yeah, sorry, we could have like a second basis edge or something. That we could have a policy and say that any breaking changes go into that, and people can only intentionally switch to that. And we sort of say that, yeah, if you rely on a basis subtheme and you are aware of those changes and breakages and that you may have to fix your theme, then you switch to that. If you want to be safe, just stick with basis, the default. I don't see any other way.
That's a good option if we have someone who's going to maintain that theme. Like Tim, I know you have your own basis version that's fixed, right? Having something like that, or at least that fixes stuff from basis, is going to be really helpful. I'm not sure that it needs. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's good to kind of keep an eye on what people are doing with it, but I would like to continue to improve the backdrop as installed, and sometimes that might be big breaking changes.
Yeah. So this is again sort of like similar situation with the translation strings. Do we have an issue? Because all these are very good ideas. We should explore which option is best and less disruptive.
About this somewhere, Tim, but do you remember if it was its own issue or if it was just?
There is an issue on how to make basis better without breaking sites. So.
Yeah.
So yeah, which one is that? Is it in the main queue?
Yes, it could be. I'm looking for it. You might probably beat me. But.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. We'll continue that.
I don't think I need to comment on the sub theme or the contrib. We're really leaning towards keeping this in core, right? So.
Well, it would be good to know that we have other options too, but yeah. I think the problem is if they stay in core. So it would be good to come up with a solution for like how do we improve core without hurting contrib,
Sure.
or any custom whatever. But I think like if we do have something that is drastic, coming up with a way to deal with that too, whether it's add a new core theme like WordPress does, or it's create a contrib theme to override core or whatever, that it would be good to have another option in there.
Well, if we do have a basis contrib themes, who's managing that? And like, is any effort being made to cross-port our changes to basis core to that contrib theme? Talk about it, and we don't have to do it today, but we might want to talk about what the status of that contrib theme is and how we are using it.
Yeah, so the contrib theme we have now was developed before basis went into core, just for testing, and I don't think it's been updated since basis went into core. So it's sort of the opposite of what we're talking about now.
Right.
That doesn't mean we couldn't change its purpose. Right now it's sort of abandoned, like, oh, this was useful once, but now we're ignoring it. But if we were to take it back and say, hey, let's make this into something where we can test new changes, and we could even have people install the basis contrib theme and see if it breaks their sub themes or whatever, it might still be a good testing tool, even if it wasn't a recommended end use tool, but it could be both.
Yeah, so the current description of that thing is contrib version of default theme in backdrop. This repo is used to create experimental features and may add features that we don't plan to add to core. So it's sort of like fits the purpose on the description.
That's great.
And the last commit has been like 3 or 4 years ago. So yeah.
Okay. So
yeah.
One of I wonder if now is a good time to bring up, because it's a little bit related, which is the sub-theming issue. We had, at least in the last week and a half, 2 people that were sort of struggling with sub-theming basis, and we've helped with that by, that blog post was one thing we did, but we're also throwing around like the idea of a starter kit for sub-theming basis. And I'm just wondering I think it might be helpful to actually, easier to talk about that than to do it all in the issue queue.
Yeah,
I'm trying to remember where that kind of got left, but we had a few different options there as well. Like,
so what was did we get to the bottom of what the problem was with Jeff's use case? Why CSS was not applying?
I'm sorry, with Jeff's case, are you saying?
Yes, Jeff Potten's case.
I have no idea what his specific problem was.
Because if it was a bug, we need to sort out the bug. If it was a user error, we need to fix documentation. Has it?
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I've sort of been working under the assumption that it was just not understanding the right way to set up a something. I'm gonna, I don't know if this is a bit risky, throw out a related issue that I've been dealing with that I don't know how to what bucket to put it in right now, which is
Sure.
the color module. And like in terms of Tatsu, my sub-theme, at your encouragement, which made sense to me at the time, I made Tatsu a sub-theme of Basis with the idea that people would sub-theme it to Tatsu. Or at least down the road, I certainly moved that way. Was I wanted to create a starter kit to sub-theme Tatsu, and I'm starting to regret that decision a little bit, partly because of, on the one hand, like updates. The reason for sub-theming things is that I want to get benefits from core, but now if we've got sort of two steps in there, right now I think Josef is applied or is trying to fix the color module in core, and that's going to have implications on my sub-theme, where if I had just sort of cloned it, I could have, it's like could have brought the color module functionality directly into my into Tatsu. So
I guess it's a matter of decision, because if you cloned it instead of doing a sub theme, then you would have a lot of overhead in maintaining, like pulling in the fixes. So I guess it's
sure. I get that, and I mean I have to make this decision on my own, but I don't know. Maybe this doesn't relate to the other discussion at all. But I mean it only sort of relates to it in that, one of my goals is to help make it easier to sub-theme, and I'm sort of doing that through Tatsu. So putting a starter kit into Tatsu, and it's like, maybe there's, I don't know. I'd like to go back to that. Is there value in having a sub-theme in Basis, like a starter kit, or should we just rely on that article, that blog post?
I think we talked about putting a starter kit in Basis last week or 2 weeks ago, or at some point in a meeting, and we were brainstorming how to make a starter kit that didn't show up in the UI. But it was something that didn't show up in the UI as like a theme you could enable. So it was actually a starter kit, and we even had like something about like a module that might give a button that would like in the right place or something.
That's right.
Yeah.
like sort of like the Drush commands that's
Exactly.
generate the template. That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
And I think we were on board with that. Like we just need to figure out technically.
Okay. We had this discussion between meetings, so it didn't get recorded.
Okay.
But I did add your comments about a module that created a sub-theme, and I put that into the issue. And there is an issue for this as well. I think that's a great idea, except that I have I could like write a template for a sub-theme and make a pull request for that. I can't write a module to write a sub-theme, I don't think. So I'm a little worried that like we're taking something I could act on to something I can't, and it might never happen.
Yeah.
So.
I want to volunteer to help with that. But I am not currently volunteering to help with that.
So many interesting issues. Yeah.
I might be able to do more of it than I think I could.
Yeah, I think you could too. I think maybe if we just point you in the right direction, you'd be surprised.
Right. Okay. Okay, let's work with that idea for a while. I'm happy with that for this discussion.
Okay.
Yep.
But I also would be curious to know, like, what kind of problems you're having with Tatsu being a sub-theme in core. I know there was a bunch of stuff that they put into like info files in Drupal 8 that made it much easier to sub-theme. So like, for example, if you don't want to include things, there's a way you can like remove things explicitly. And I wonder if we need more of that kind of support for sub-themes. So like if you wanted to say, don't include color modules, you could disable that easily. So it would be interesting if, these are probably all documented in the Tatsu queue, but it would be interesting to me to see like what those problems are and see if there isn't a course for this should be easier. It sounds like that's what you're running into. Like I created this particular way because it's supposed to be easier and it's not easier. So let's try and figure out how to make it easier and figure out what those pain points are.
Well, part of the problem is just me learning. Part of it is that there's some things that are kind of in movement that you wouldn't expect to be, like color module.
Yeah.
Right? There's a sort of a major, there's a patch that makes kind of a major change.
So
Yeah.
this is so that some themes can inherit color settings, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So my general take on this is that there's certain things that are repetitive and can be automated with creating sub-themes. And if we can automate those, then we lower the steps and the time that people require. So it makes it more, less of a struggle. How much less? It might be just a tiny bit, but depending on how tech savvy people are and how proficient with Drupal or Backdrop. So if we can automate things, it would be great if we could do that and figure out a good way to do that.
Sounds good.
Yep.
Anything else on theming? I have one more issue I want to talk about.
Yep. And I have one as well, but yeah.
Not related to Backdrop Core or anything else. It is the pop-up banner for events. Laren has been working on some fantastic designs for the banner, and now that I know that we have an event coming up where we have a booth, I'm super excited about it. So I keep checking in on this issue every week. Issue number 424 in the backdropcms.org queue. And the latest comment there, or second latest comment, has a version of the banner that I think looks really great. It has our logo, it has the dragon, it has our mission, it has some of the reasons you might want to choose Backdrop. It has our website URL. I think it looks really great. I would love to see that get finalized and then figure out how to print such a thing. And I also wonder if we need anything else for a conference, thinking about conferences that I go to and seeing what other people have at their booths. Stickers, obviously we have those. Do we need a like pamphlet, or are business cards enough that just has like visit the website on it?
Sorry, what was the question again? If we have
what else do we need if we go to a conference? We have a banner and we have a person and we have some stickers.
Stickers?
What else?
Yeah.
What else do
that's
we
it.
need?
Well,
That's it?
I think the right approach to this, right, is to think about the problem we're trying to solve. What are our goals at the conference? What do we hope to get out of interacting with people? Top of my head, like I don't want printed materials at conferences anymore. So to me, anything printed doesn't feel like it would be useful, but I don't know. Let's talk about what,
Yeah.
I would think that the major goal is to talk to people, maybe to get a business card in their hand just so they have a URL. I mean, because really big.
Okay. That's
So-
kind of what I was thinking too. Like, I don't want print materials, but I am constantly surprised by how many people go, do you have a card? And I'm like, I can't believe people are still using cards, but they are. And so I'm like, okay, well, if people are still using them, we should have them. So that's a thing. I also was thinking of doing some kind of a, like what I want them, the point of this thing is we want them to know about Backdrop. We want them to know that it is very similar to Drupal 7, yet newer / better / more affordable / whatever it is we want them to know. And I think that we can show them that if we can show them Backdrop. And I think that having like a laptop there, it would be super compelling. It's important, but like let them click around. But I would love to have like a, I don't know, like a picture or video or a slide loop or something of like, here's 4 things that you need to see that are bigger than just one person with a laptop. And I don't know how to make that happen. Like that in my head is like, oh my God, you need a flat screen TV and like video production skills. And it just like flies out the window. But if we could somehow come up with some way to have the same effect
So-
on.
So I'm sure that this is going to be maybe costly, but what you're describing is like a kiosk with a computer that people can play with, and we already have the demo sites. So that's one thing.
Yeah.
It's funny. It's funny that you mentioned. See how you said. I really like the versions, the two versions that I saw now in that ticket. I haven't revisited that ticket about the banner. But one thing that is missing compared to the version before it with the dragon out of the egg is mentioning Drupal 7. So I'm not sure if this was a conscious or decided.
Right.
So yeah. So the thing is, if you go to a Drupal conference with that, it's hello, this is a new CMS. Whereas I think that saying this is the 7 improved, or this is your go-to solution if you're having second thoughts about moving to D8. So if we don't mention D7 at all, then we are presenting it as a totally new CMS. And my concern there is that we might lose a bit of audience there.
We
Yeah.
discussed this in the issue queue.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. With being in favor of reintroducing D7 mentioning there or not?
Yeah, I also feel like this conference in particular is not a Drupal conference. It's a nonprofit technology conference. But the primary reason we're there is because all of those people are already on Drupal 7. And so I think having something that's like, hey, this will be easy for you is going to be important. I don't know that it needs to be on our banner. Like that banner could work for other events where like people don't know what Drupal is, or I mean, there could be people at this audience that also don't know what Drupal is, and we still want to convince them they need a website. But I don't know. I mean, maybe it should be on the banner. We can make another banner later.
Yeah. Maybe the point that I was trying to make is that this banner is making the assumption that people know what Backtrack is, or specifically that they know that it is a fork or a better version of D7.
Does it? I don't think it does. I think it's just like this banner tells people there is a CMS, and they don't need to know that it's Drupal. And I think that that's better for us long term. Like we don't want to be stuck.
The argument that was made, Gregory, is that the different audience, that the Drupal 7 message is important to some audiences and not others. A lot of audiences don't care. And I think the decision was that it's easier to not include it and convey that in other ways than it is to always have it there when it might be confusing. Right?
I understand it. I understand this, but this is a counter argument. Until D7 becomes end of life, we need that first audience, the one that I was referring to.
Yeah.
Past that point, people will have already made their decision, and then we can stop referring D7 at all entirely. But up to another 2 years or so, maybe 2.5, we sort of like we need to grab the audience that is having thoughts on what to do with D7.
Yeah.
So
I kind of agree with that. But I would also like to revisit the like, if we're going to tell them Backdrop is Drupal 7 in other ways, what are those other ways? And see if we can't come up with something that might be more compelling than where it's on a banner.
Yeah.
Right.
I'll revisit that issue.
I will also think about it.
Yeah.
But it is for our weekly developer meeting. So do you have anything unrelated to anything we've talked about you want to add really quickly before we wrap up this meeting?
Yeah, maybe add it so that it can be discussed during the next meeting. So it's about a UI pattern. It fits in the UX bit. So it's ticket 3385. And that's where I'm stuck with the states problem that I mentioned. So the idea there is to sort of like reuse the same UI pattern as we have for the languages minus the draggability, because in languages we have the crosshair that allows you to drag them, reorder them. So where I'm stuck at this moment is I'll file a pull request because I have it ready. It works. What doesn't work is that if you select one default language, then the respective checkbox, search item, the respective checkbox gets disabled so that you cannot have something that is default and at the same time, maybe I should say gets locked as enabled. so that you cannot disable something that is set as default. The problem is that if you move the default options to something else, this checkbox remains blocked. So that's a problem with us, the the JS, I guess, or the states system. I'll try to see if I can fix it, but my JS skills are laughable. So I may need help with that. And this is an existing bug, like or UX WTF thing for the languages as well. UI. So it's not specific to this bit. And what I really wanted quick feedback on is, should I file a pull request as it is now, because the problem that I'm facing is a known problem because it exists in other bits, or should we fix everything and then it gets in? That's and what I can do is maybe file two pull requests. One does not include any states functionality and one does, so that you can see what would happen. Like we could merge the UI fix, like the conversion, to a table, and then you can use the sandbox that is created by the second PR to see, like live, what I'm talking to when I say the bug for the states thing.
Yeah, I'm not sure I really fully understand the problem, but I think if I could test it and then test a fix.
Yeah. So I think Nate describes the problem in his last comment there from back in February, where he says that yeah, the browsers behave differently, and and they set DOM properties instead of attributes, or the other way around. So it does work. So yes. So what I'm going to do is, I think that it's best like that. So I'll file two pull requests. One will have absolutely no states implementation. The other one will, and you can sort of like compare.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. Okay, cool.
Yeah. And
I'll add it. I'll add it in the agenda as a UX issue that
I dropped it in there. I just didn't link anything up.
Okay, I'll link it then.
Okay.
Cool. Thanks. Thank you.
All right. Let's wrap up this meeting and shift gears for the developer meeting.